Hey everyone, so you're wondering where my friend Mike Lindell is? Well, guess what? He was actually creating the My Slipper. It's like walking on clouds, right? Don't forget to use the promo code Carter, Carter, and you will receive 40% off of your My Slippers. Your whole family's going to love it. One of the toughest things I've ever had to do is cover the drug war in Mexico and the drug war in the United States. It has not only destroyed families on both sides of the border, but it's escalating, and we've seen that. You and I have both seen that with the number of deaths inside the U.S. of our young people, as well as American citizens, as well as foreigners. I mean, we're seeing not only an increase in violence in Mexico that is unheard of, something we don't even see in Afghanistan or Iraq combined. I'm not even joking when I tell you that. The horrors that are across that border, but the death rate of young people in this country, and most parents are unaware of how that is increasing and how their children are being poisoned. That's what I'm going to be talking about today when I have former special agent in charge, Derek Maltz, who worked with the DOJ. He worked on a number of projects and the DEA, focused on the nexus between the drug cartels and terrorism in the United States. Yes, it's very real, as well as the situation in the United States now as there is an escalation in addiction rates and a poisoning of our young children. And what he is going to tell you is going to stun you, because I got to tell you, it's probably one of the hardest episodes I will do. I have good friends who have lost their children to drugs and to addiction. But the fact that not only are we being poisoned by the drug cartels, but Derek Maltz is going to explain why China is involved in unrestricted warfare against the United States. Not only are we going to talk about that, but we have big news on the UFO situation, folks, on the unidentified flying objects, as we formerly called them, or as they are called now, unidentified aerial phenomena. So we have big news on that, because the former director of national intelligence just revealed some very important information on that, information that shows that we are not alone. And I'll explain that later in the show. So we've got a really big show for you today, really big. But before I get there, I want to make sure that all of you go to SaraACarter.com. Do that right now. Go to SaraACarter.com, and then you can fill out. You'll see I have an email list you can sign up for. So sign up for our email list. We're going to get you all the latest stories. I promise you will be on the front lines of some of the most important stories in your life. Really, stories that affect us as individual Americans, that affect us, not even just here in the United States, but anywhere in the world, right? We're trying to get those stories to you so that you know what's going on. We're not going to allow the government to control and censor us. And that's why we have the email list, just so I can reach out to you. Because if we don't, guess what? We have been censored on Twitter before. We have seen shadow banning. We have seen the fact that even on Facebook, that they can withhold stories. There's times where I can even be watching the back end of our site and just be like, what's going on here? You know, what's going on here? How come we only have 2 people from Twitter out of more than 1.2 million followers? That's impossible. So go on there, and I want you to sign up for the email list. That's how I can stay in touch with you. And remember, today's podcast is sponsored by the Association of Mature American Citizens. It is the only conservative alternative to AARP. Just listen to me. It is the only conservative alternative to AARP. You have to understand this. If you want someone who's going to fight for you, you are going to go to AMAC. So go to amac.us/Carter. Put in CARTER. Go to amac.us/Carter. Let's talk about this border crisis and some of the new information that's coming out. First of all, we know that the drug cartels are amassing probably billions, if not trillions of dollars by poisoning our own children. We also know that there is, this synergy between the two, because if we didn't have addicts, they wouldn't be purchasing the drugs, right? We wouldn't be purchasing it if we didn't have the addicts. But we also know that right now, not only are the Mexican drug cartels trying to addict our citizens, but that China and other countries are using it as a type of unrestricted warfare. and that our government is not paying attention to this. Not the way it should. I don't think any of our previous administrations, other than President Trump's administration, had really noticed this or had really called people out on this. I remember President Trump was back and forth debating whether or not to designate the drug cartels terrorist organizations. It was a big, big debate. Of course, there were people in the DEA that didn't want that. There were others that said, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we can drone Mexico? No, of course not. But there was some issues about tracking money, U.S. Treasury being able to track money easier if they were designated drug cartels. That never happened, although symbolically it did when I went to Ohio and I testified before the Ohio legislature, and symbolically they designated the the cartels terrorist organizations. It's still a debate that's going on today, but I want you to think about the fact that our foreign adversaries, along with using the drug cartels, along with their nexus with the drug cartels, have established an unrestricted warfare on the United States in the shadows, but pretty much in front of our faces. We're just not even paying attention to it. Right now, Fox News has a story up, and so does SaraCarter.com. It's the U.S.-Mexico border. Traffickers are earning as much as $14 million a day last month. Think about that. Think about it. How much money? $14 million a day last month? Border traffickers and all of the other cash that's flowing in and all of the other contraband. Do you know how incredible that is? But this is nothing new. I think what I'm so frustrated about, and we see so many of our young people dying and so little action being taken by the people that we voted for to represent us, right? Voted for to represent us, while they're spending all this time focused on where we're going to house the illegal migrants, all the children that are coming through from our terrible policies, by the way, endangering the lives of innocent people as well that are trying to get to the United States for a better life. We're endangering their lives as well. Our children are dying. Our law enforcement has their hands tied behind their backs. And who is out there to help us? That's why I brought Derek Maltz on. He's been screaming from the rooftops. Will somebody just listen? Will somebody hear the cries of parents all across the country whose child maybe tried one Adderall pill? Oh, hey, I'll take an Adderall. It'll help me stay up all night to study for my exam. And then they die. And then, yeah, they do. They die. Some of them have just died because inside that fake Adderall pill is fentanyl. And it's not mixed by a professional chemist. It's mixed by somebody who doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And they really don't care, because for every death, there's 10 addicts, right? Or whatever. They don't really care. The drug cartels have no loyalty to anyone. People are a commodity, and it doesn't matter if they die. I mean, people will always tell me, oh, why would the drug cartels want to kill, their customer base? They don't really care about their customer base. They don't really have any loyalty. I don't know how to get this through people's heads. You think that they're thinking like a rational human being. They're not. These organizations are about power, money, and their ability to control their product, their ability to basically take over governments. They are a shadow government in Mexico, believe it or not. They have used their money to basically blackmail even our law enforcement officials, or to lure them to their side. I mean, they have power that is unheard of, and our agents are just trying to keep up. And they are begging law enforcement. Law enforcement is begging our lawmakers to do the right thing, to pay attention to what is happening to our nation and how it is being poisoned by these monsters. I want you to listen to this. This is, believe it or not, this is me on C-SPAN. Jenny Terre, who works for me, she found this old clip. It's me on C-SPAN describing the migrant crisis. This is in 2007. Listen to this.
The things that interested me the most, Susan, was when I was in Mexico. And about 2.5 years ago, I was on the border in a town called, right outside of Tijuana, Colonia Laureles. It's a small little colony of very poor Mexican migrants that were planning on crossing into the U.S. Many of them used a tunnel, which I had discovered with them, that they had led me to it, that went underneath the border into the San Diego Tijuana estuary. And while I was down there, many of the men were very frank with me. They had told me they had been arrested before in the United States. They had been deported. They were on their way back. Some were from Honduras. Some were from Ecuador. But what fascinated me the most was the fact that they had mentioned that a group of Chinese and another group of Arab citizens had crossed the border there with them as well in the past. Now,
were they aiding that process or just going
along?
No,
they were just a part of it because many of them hid within the Gulf area. There's like a gulch near the Gulf right there where they moved through underneath these tunnels. And I thought to myself, okay, if this is happening, and as they told me too, with that the Mexican police officers as well as Mexican military were aiding drug cartels who were moving narcotics across the border. And I didn't only hear it in Tijuana. I actually heard this in Juarez, Mexico, in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. So that's where my investigations began from the ground up. I thought if this is true, then there has to be documented evidence of this in the United States. I have to find that before I can report that. So I went on a quest. I met with intelligence officers out in the field. I talked to folks in the Mexican government. I went in many times into very dangerous border cities and border towns, researching this. And eventually what was built was a series of stories that led me as a reporter to believe that the border was certainly a national security threat.
Wow. That was like the young me. That's weird. Like the old me looking at the young me. I was like, wow. that was wild. I was like, I would never let my daughter go in there. I told her, don't ever think about that. I used to go in and out of the border a lot. And, you know, as evidenced by this video from 2007, right? This was a very serious crisis even then. So why has nothing changed? Why can't we find a solution? I'm not saying perfect. We're never going to be perfect, right? There will always be bad guys, good guys. That's the story of all mankind. But why are we going to let the bad guys win? Why are we not going to find a solution, a common solution, not only for the United States, but to our partners on the South? Those are our partners. Those are our neighbors. We have got to hold our neighbors accountable, just like we have to be held accountable for the crisis that we are all creating here in the United States. Right? That is our duty. And it is our duty to fight for our children, to defend our children, and to defend our nation. And when we see blatant poisoning of our country, when we see that drug cartels and these groups like, or state actors like the Chinese are targeting our nation, they don't have to come at us with weapons and guys jumping out of airplane, you know, like Red Dawn. They could do this like unrestricted warfare, right? In the shadows. We got to stand up and say, hey, we know what you're doing. It's unacceptable. We are not going to allow this to happen, and we are going to fight you on this. You know what? We are going to respond in kind. It is unacceptable. It will not happen in our country. Why can't we do that? Well, those are the questions I am going to be asking Derek Maltz. I know he's waiting patiently for us. Remember, I told you this is a man who I would have on my show every week if I could. If I could take him and bring him on the show every week, I would, because there is nobody better at understanding what is happening to our country and the border than Derek Maltz. He was a special agent in charge with the United States Department of Justice. He worked in their Special Operations Division, which is their SOD, for more than 10 years. And by the way, he previously held the position as chief of the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force, which is the oldest and largest drug task force in America. You know, Derek also played a vital role in developing and implementing the DOJ's, basically the Department of Homeland Security's nationwide deconfliction program. And he was responsible for coordinating multi-agency efforts that, listen to this, resulted in the capture of the Sinaloa cartel kingpin, El Chapo Guzman. There is nobody better and no closer friend than Derek Maltz. First of all, Derek, thank you so much for being back on the Sara Carter Show. You're not only probably one of the top experts on the U.S.-Mexico border, but you're a good friend of mine, and you're somebody who truly cares about this nation. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sara.
You know, Derek, part of the reason why I wanted you on the show today, I've been covering the border for a long time, for decades, but over the last several weeks, as more and more people are flooding into the United States, more and more drugs are flooding into the United States. We see an increase in violence in Mexico. I thought that there was no better person than you, somebody who's worked on task force teams that have dealt with Chapo Guzman, who's now being held in the United States, somebody who worked on Project Cassandra that targeted terrorist funding, drug money that went overseas with Hezbollah. You have, I think, the best perspective, and this isn't just my opinion. You know, I've talked to a lot of folks that in the DEA and people that deal with the president's drug policy that have worked with you in the past that tell me there is nobody better than Derek at understanding this situation. And I guess Congress feels that way too, because you recently were called to testify on behalf of the Republicans, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was asked to come in and speak about the drug crisis on the border and some of the impacts to American families and how these counterfeit pills were coming into America at record levels and how we're seeing death and destruction all throughout the United States.
That's so the fentanyl crisis. And this is what people aren't understanding. I want all of you to understand this. Derek has been beating the drums on this. I have been beating the drums on this with the Dark Wire and Investigation Foundation. Derek and I were both, I did this documentary. It was a nonprofit educational documentary. Derek's in it. It dealt with fentanyl and how it is killing our children. So I want you to explain to parents out there. I want you to tell them how much of a warning this is, how dangerous this is, how this is a national security issue that is affecting every single one of us.
So first of all, very important, China and Mexican cartels are working together as a lethal partnership. That should tell you everything you need to know. However, what they're doing now is something that we've never seen in the history of the country. They're taking poisonous drugs like fentanyl and they're putting them in pills. They have pill presses inside of Mexico and in our country, and they're making these counterfeit oxycodone pills, Xanax, and now even Adderall. We had a warning by the DEA last week up in New England. They had all these pills that were labeled as Adderall that contain methamphetamine. Well, that's really disturbing because the kids that are taking Adderall are very, very young. To me, this is the cartel's conscious decision to target the kids so they have customers for life with methamphetamine. But really what's disturbing is that kids all over the country and young Americans are taking these counterfeit pills and not waking up. There's story after story that you see on social media. And unfortunately, you're not seeing that on mainstream media. But
a lot of these kids actually think that they're taking an Adderall. It could be like a friend. I want you as parents under there. I'm a parent. I know you are too, Derek. I know how horrifying this is. You and I have friends who have lost their children to narcotics that have come across the border from Mexico, to fentanyl, to heroin. I want you to think about this. Your kid could be in school, in high school, right? And they could be, someone could say, hey, you want an Adderall? Oh, no, it's fine. It came from my mom's, cabinet, or it came from a friend of mine on the street. All your kid has to do is take that pill, that unlucky pill, one time, and then they're found dead somewhere in their room, in a bathroom, with friends, going to the mall. I mean, this is how serious it is.
Right. So that's the difference now, Sara. And this is not a Republican and a Democratic issue. This is a red, white, and blue issue. All America will be impacted and has been impacted from this catastrophic crisis that we have with the cartels working with China. And it will continue because right now there's no action. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of misleading going on, but there's no action to deal with the cartels.
I want to play, this is from your testimony, Derek. I want to play this just so everyone can hear. This is from the recent testimony that Derek Maltz gave before Congress, and then we'll talk a little bit about that hearing.
Look, I'm no expert on, border interdiction statistics, but I've heard for many, many years in the DEA, like 10% is seized, right? So if you look at, just as an example, in January, there were 1,950 pounds of meth in Dallas, 2,500 pounds in El Paso in December. Another 1,900 pounds were seized in Texas. In Los Angeles, they had record seizures of meth, 2,000 pounds, another 3,000 in San Diego. So lots of meth, lots of fentanyl, lots of cocaine, lots of marijuana are getting in there. But the thing that concerns me the most are the counterfeit pills that are disguised as what they call Mexi-Oxy 30s. They're the blue pills that the kids are taking, and they have no idea it's poison. It's pure fentanyl in many cases. There's no quality control. They don't have chemists that sit there like FDA and regulate the amount of fentanyl. They're just trying to make as much money as they can, and it's killing Americans at record levels.
That's just incredible to me. When I hear those numbers, I don't even know what to think. Why isn't the government doing anything about this? To me, this is probably one of the biggest national security failures in U.S. history. I mean, because if we want to talk about deaths, they talk about COVID deaths. They talk about deaths related to this, related to that. We're talking tens of thousands. How many millions of lives have already been lost?
Sarah, so first of all, the CDC put out statistics earlier that through July of 2020, there were 83,000 dead Americans from overdoses, all right? And now, just keep this in mind, that the recent Border Patrol statistics through the first 5 months has shown a 361% increase in fentanyl seizures from last year's first 5 months. They've already passed all of the seizure levels from last year. 4,900 pounds have been seized already of fentanyl. One fentanyl kilo, could kill 500,000 people. It only takes a couple of milligrams.
Explain that, Derek, because that's important. A lot of people don't realize this. We're not just talking about a narcotic here. We're talking about something that could be used as a weapon of mass destruction, right?
Right. So like right now, just a hypothetical, if Al-Qaeda had 1 pound of chemical weapons in Mexico, the entire U.S. government would be all over that and going after that and trying to keep it out of our country, right? But you're talking about already seized 4,900 pounds in the first 5 months of fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing. The DEA lab just did a recent study, and they analyzed these counterfeit pills, right? And they determined that 26% of them had a lethal dose. So if you look at DEA Phoenix alone, last year they reported 6 million counterfeit oxy pills were seized. That could have killed, with no exaggeration, like 1.5 million Americans, just based on the DEA lab statistics on lethal doses, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Not every pill is going to kill, but one pill can kill. And that's the point. And kids don't know. When they're at college and they're trying to stay awake for the big exam and somebody says, hey, pop this oxy, pop this pill, this Adderall, stay awake. And next thing you know, they're dead as they're trying to get their college degrees. And so you would think that our politicians and our government leaders would have more of a sense of urgency. But right now, they're too busy putting out false information and trying to cover up this border crisis. The FEMA is down there. In my world, FEMA is for emergency disasters. It's not for,
But they said it was a challenge. But they said it was a challenge, not a crisis, right? I mean, this is what we're dealing with every single day. I want to play this clip. This is from the DEA. This is to show you all out there how, Derek, as well as his partners in the DEA and others across the board, whether they're at the Texas Department of Public Safety, whether they're working in the sheriff's station in Yuma, Arizona, how law enforcement officials are trying to warn Americans every day. But guess what? They are up against an administration that refuses. And by the way, this is historical. It's not just this administration. It's other administrations, both Republican and Democrat, who refuse to call what is happening at our border a crisis. And it's going to be too late. Listen to this clip right here.
81,000 Americans died of a drug overdose last year. It's the most this country has ever seen.
The DEA announcing the launch of Operation Engage, allowing local field divisions to focus on the drugs most threatening to their regions. In the Manchester area, that's fentanyl and methamphetamine. The DEA says cartels are targeting fentanyl users with meth.
That's a toxic combination.
And he says they're not the only targets.
Now they're taking pills like Adderall, and they're using nothing but crystal methamphetamine to look like an Adderall. If cartels are making a business decision to make Adderall pills out of crystal methamphetamine, they're targeting the children of our communities.
So they're literally killing our children. So we literally know that these terrorists, because I want to call them terrorists, these drug cartels are terrorists, right? And with the help of China, a known enemy of the United States, are addicting and killing American kids. Can you explain to me, based on your time in the government, the work that you've done, why our government is allowing this to happen?
Well, Sarah, I hate to say this, but failed leadership is something that I witnessed every day when I was at SOD across a couple of administrations. So what I would say is that, first of all, they don't understand the crisis. They don't understand the issues. They are still thinking the drug opioid problem is from overprescribing. That was 15, 20 years ago. That should have been dealt with when the corporate cartels dumped 100 billion opioid pills into America. Washington Post did a great investigative story. Mm-hmm. There were 6 companies that were involved with distributing 100 billion opioids. The public got addicted. The kids then went out to the streets. They needed their high because this is very powerful, this addiction. But now it's a whole different ballgame. It's the cartels working with China who provide all the chemicals, who send it into Mexico. They do the pill pressing. They send the stuff to the U.S. They send it to the U.S. and then they make pills in the U.S. as well. We're finding pill presses all over. The guy that was on that video is a friend of mine. I talk to him almost every day, like I talk to most DEA agents and supervisors around the country. The problem is that nobody's even talking about this. Give the parents a chance. The parents need to know what their little kid could pop any day of the week. And this is what's missing. There's nobody discussing it. There's a failed leadership across the board.
You know what? I agree with you. There are so many parents when I bring this up and I say, I did this documentary. Do you know about fentanyl? Do you know about carfentanil? Do you know what's happening in our country? Do you know that young children are experimenting with these drugs? Did you know that in Dayton, Ohio, for example, remember we saw the increase in Franklin, Ohio, where they actually had at one point to bring in freezers to house the bodies at the morgue because they were overflowing. And now we see that happening again. Derek, how do we as a society, how can we as parents even make a difference? How can we as parents even make changes? Or how do we get our government to do the right thing? I mean, for crying out loud, President Biden hasn't even gone to the border yet. Let me play you this clip.
Are you thinking of going to the border?
At some point I will, yes.
Do you want to see firsthand what's going on in those facilities?
I know what's going on in those facilities.
President, why do you think the message to the migrants telling them to stay home, to don't come now, why do you think that hasn't resonated yet? What more can be done, sir?
Well, a lot more. We're in the process of doing it now, including making sure that we reestablish what existed before, which was they can stay in place and make their case from their home country.
First of all, I couldn't even understand half of what he said. He says he's going to go to the border. There is a huge fence around Capitol Hill. I know you got a lot of, you kind of went viral. I want everyone to hear what you had to say. But we got a fence around Capitol Hill with National Guard everywhere. I was out there for Sean Hannity's show, standing out there on, I call it Nancy's wall, right? 10 feet tall, protecting all of these lawmakers from I don't know what, from the guy that's like, the street performer on the street, the kids that are jogging in Washington, D.C. Yet our nation is being flooded with drugs and illegal migrants who are going to be living in the shadows, who as well will be suffering, right? So what is that? Answer that question. And then another follow up to that. I know I'm going to double you down with 2 questions right here. China knows very well what it's doing. The Chinese government isn't just doing this to make extra cash. Is China poisoning our country on purpose?
So a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to go back to Franklin County. The recent coroner statistics that I saw out of Ohio. So even though there was like a 75% increase in overdose deaths, 85% of them were from fentanyl. Okay. And that's in Ohio. So It's clear that fentanyl is what's killing the kids. Now, going back to the hearing, I was absolutely disgusted and very sad by what I saw. I had to park in Union Station because I had no idea I was going to the Afghanistan Green Zone to testify at Congress, right? So I had to park in Union Station. And then I had been met by razor wire fences. And what was really pathetic is when I saw hundreds and hundreds of National Guard out there in packs of 10, just sitting around talking with their long guns, right, pointed at the ground. and I couldn't get in. I had to walk an hour and 15 minutes. So I was really upset. I almost went home. It almost deterred me from going to do the testimony, but I felt obligated to the family. So I continued and I got in there. But then, of course, I had to explain this to the congressmen and women, like, this is insane. Meanwhile, I'm watching the news and seeing what's going on the border, and it was absolutely disgusting, a complete misuse of resources and no prioritization. But going to the China question, again, I'm no Chinese Communist Party expert. I defer to others that are out there, but unrestricted warfare, this fits it perfectly, because even when we went after Afghani kingpins, we learned that they look at it as a jihad against the West. If they kill Americans and at the same time they can make millions of dollars, it's a 2-for-1 special, right? But in China, they will do anything to destabilize the economy of America, right? We are their number one enemy when it comes to the world economic stage. And America under Donald Trump was doing very, very well, right? So we were threatening them. So they instituted this new form of, unrestricted warfare by launching these chemical weapons. But this didn't start like this past year, Sarah. 2010, they started with the synthetic drugs coming out of Wuhan and other labs where they had K2 and spice and bath salts, taking our kids and putting them in hospitals all over the country. If you remember, in the summer of 2018, we had people dropping in New Haven, Connecticut, D.C., New York, Chicago. People died because they had rat poisoning in the synthetic drugs that were coming out of labs in China. So it's not just this particular fentanyl issue. It's going on forever. And then the methamphetamine, the chemicals. That's why we're seizing multi-tons of methamphetamine all over America, because the chemicals are coming at record levels to the Sinaloa cartel, to Jalisco New Generation cartel in these labs in Mexico. 7 tons are produced every 3 days in these methamphetamine labs. That's something like we've never seen in the history of the country. This is verified. This is not just embellishment of the facts. This is what America has to deal with now. But unfortunately, it all comes down to one thing: the families that are going to funerals and their loved ones and the lost generation in the country.
There's no doubt, Derek, there's no doubt that those are the people that pay the heaviest price, as well as what I always say, even the migrants. You want to talk about the migrants? It's when you have a lawless border that plays games with poor people, with poor migrants, when they're being lied to by the drug cartels and the human smugglers. They're being trafficked into the United States in droves. And that way, I'll let you explain it, because I've seen it with my own eyes. At one end of the border, they're moving in the dope to poison our country. And at the other end, they've got our Border Patrol occupied with diapers and kids and unaccompanied minors and family units and, 600 people at one time. Well, we just don't have those resources.
Right. So Sarah, unfortunately, our brave men and women in the Border Patrol have gone from border security to migrant care, right? But the cartels are a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, so they understand this. They're going to take advantage of the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities. So the one thing that people don't understand, and you know this very well because you're down on the border, you're not sitting in Washington pontificating all day. You're seeing it with your own eyes and your own ears. You're hearing it. And then you're talking to the experts like Brandon Judd and these other guys on the Border Patrol. But here's the thing. They're flooding the zone. What does that mean? They take the rafts. They bring the people in. They bring them right to the Border Patrol. Here you go, Border Patrol. But then a mile down, the border, they'll flood the country with these special interest aliens. They'll flood the country with drugs, and then they'll open up the way for the weapons and the cash to come southbound. So they're accomplishing all their goals in their business enterprise just by sending the migrants in. And let's not forget how much money they're charging the migrants to get here. And now we're seeing for the first time the tags. They're tagging the migrants like they're cattle to make sure that they're paying the pesos, the taxes, right? Because if they don't pay the fee to the cartels, then their family is vulnerable in these countries. And one last thing on that. The journey coming into America is not very safe. Look what happened to those Guatemalans in January, where 17 were killed or 19 were killed. They were burned to a crisp. And there were supposedly Mexican police involved. We're working with the cartels because these people didn't have the money to pay. So it's a combination of many, many factors. And that's why way back when you and I went to Ohio with Heidi Riggs to testify about declaring these cartels as terrorists. We were right on the money then. And
That's
this
right.
needs to be considered now. But unfortunately, right now, this administration wants to go soft on everybody.
And I want to bring that up because Heidi Riggs is an amazing woman who became very good friends with Derek Maltz and I, and she has been a fighter to warn parents so that they don't have to go through the tragedy that she went through when she lost her daughter, poor daughter Marin, to addiction. I mean, from the time Marin started to use heroin up until, and this is, I'm talking middle class family. This is not, we're trying to break down the walls and the barriers for you guys. This is not just about kids in poor, underprivileged neighborhoods. This is about kids all across the board up to the most wealthiest kids that are becoming addicts. Some of them don't even have a chance to live that long, but Marin lived about 18 months from the time she first tried heroin until the time she died. And I remember reading through her diary with Heidi and how she begged her mom. She said, it's like a devil inside me. Like I can't stop wanting it. It was so horrific for her. This poor girl. I mean, she was so young. She was 20 years old. She just, it was tearing her life apart. And I want to cry when I think about this because we have children, Derek, and we see these children die every day. And now we have unrestricted warfare. We've had it for a long time. We know it's happening. We know China's doing it. We know other countries are involved in it. We know money is moving from the United States overseas to terrorist organizations. We know the Mexican drug cartels are taking advantage of the situation. And I'm going to tell you, this is the one bone I have to pick, right? Even with the previous administration. Most parents don't even know what's going on. Where are the public service announcements? Where are the people standing up and beating the drums and saying, watch out. This isn't just about drug use. This isn't just about smoking some pot behind the restroom at your high school. This is about your kids literally taking a pill that will kill them. This is about poisoning America.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up about the education piece. So ONDCP has the responsibility for letting the public understand this crisis and educate and providing training and treatment. And so they do some things pretty well. But one thing that's been missing is just this unbelievable trend with the counterfeit pills. So, yes, Marin Riggs, she passed away after 18 months. And like you said, the kids today are not getting 18 months because the cartels have put the poison in these pills that are murdering these kids all over America. So it's a different crisis now because we weren't dealing with the crisis before. So it's getting worse. And that's it's not going to go away just from talking about it. You have to do something about it. And the biggest thing, Sarah, is that people have to be held accountable. If you put somebody in as the drug czar, they should be held accountable on the amount of people that are dying. And if it's not working, they need to be removed and you get somebody else. I'm sorry, this is really important. People are being murdered in our country, and we need to hold government leaders accountable. And the public should be, demanding action from their lawmakers on both sides. It's not a Republican or Democratic thing. But right now, people are not saying much. They just don't know what to do. That's why these family groups on Facebook and other social media, they're desperate. Like, look at the story of Lisa Dean up in Connecticut. She contacted me because her brother saw me speak down in the Palm Beach World Affairs Council about transnational crime threats, how the terrorist organizations are connected to the drug traffickers. And so the thing is she had to put billboards up in Connecticut, but she had to raise the money from nonprofits, right? Well, the money's running out. Nobody's got money during COVID to pay for these billboards and stuff like that. So where's the government resources? But instead, they now have hotels for $86 million for these illegal migrants to come into the country.
That's what I was going to say. $86 million invested in hotels. I was just talking to some sources of mine along the border preparing to go on my trip, and I'm hearing all kinds of stories that are just absolutely unbelievable. One of them, which Fox News just broke, which was the fact that, right now they're just releasing people without any, asylum or, notice to appear in court, paperwork. They're just releasing them. And I talked to one of the Border Patrol agents. I'm like, what in the world is going on here? He goes, hey, look, you want to hear the truth? The truth is, even when we give them a notice to appear in court, it usually isn't for a few years down the road and nobody ever shows up anyway. So who cares? Get them out because we can't even keep them. There's not even enough space. So who pays the price? The American people, right, Derek?
Right. So let me go back to that because I'm glad you brought this up. And I think you would agree with me. Like, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but probably 80 to 90% of these migrants, these kids, They're innocent. They're trying to come here for a better life. They're trying to establish themselves, get a job. And my heart goes out for those young families. Don't get me wrong. These are not like the people that worry me. What worries me is those special interest aliens and these other migrants that get in as our brave men and women are dealing with the migrant care. And so, but the other thing that really bothers me, I have to say it, Sarah, is you got so many people out of work. You have businesses that have failed during COVID. You have schools that are closed. You have families that are in crisis situations because of their household income. But then we're going to spend $86 million on other countries' kids. No, we have to put our kids first, our communities first, in all communities, not just affluent communities, but we want to clean up the homelessness, right? We have our vets sleeping in tents on the streets. When I went down that day at the DC, I couldn't believe all the new tent cities. It's really, it's growing. And if we have money that's left over or whatever, spend it on our citizens first and get the legal process working.
Derek, before I let you go, what is the one thing you'd like to get across to families, American families out there, parents who are worried about their children? What can we do? Where can we go? How can we get our lawmakers to act on this so that we don't lose our children? What can we do to save our country? Well, unfortunately, our families, our parents have to do what parents do. They have to take these things, on their own for now. They have to first talk to their kids. They have to get resources from the DEA website, from ONDCP, from your website, all the websites that are putting it out. Show the kids the videos, talk to them, get into their heads. That's step number one. That's the urgent situation. You can't rely on the government because it's not going to happen quick. And if you wait too long, then basically your kid may be one of these victims. Then what you need to do is you need to talk to the local DEA offices. They have Project Engage now, where they're coming out to communities. They're talking to community groups. My buddy that's up in New England, he did a session up in New Hampshire with 8,500 kids and teachers and parents. So they have, all kinds of community interaction now. But the other thing is we have to now start writing letters to the congressmen and women. We have to start demanding results. We have to start, having peaceful rallies. I know I was asked to come out and speak at the Chinese embassy, sometime soon to talk about these issues, to start getting the awareness out. So it's an awareness issue first. We have to get the word out, and then we have to have task forces in our government agencies being held accountable for results. And I don't mean just law enforcement. Law enforcement does a great job. They put their lives on the line every day. They're locking up some of the biggest, baddest drug traffickers out there, but we need all these other leaders, the community leaders, the addiction specialists, the healthcare professionals, mental health care, right? So we have to get people together to come with some ideas and start putting some heat on this thing. Right now, people are just like going through the motions. Like for the president to suggest he may go to the border sometime soon because he knows what's going on. You had his State Department spokesperson the other day saying, I just want to let everyone know the border's closed. The border's closed. Are you not watching the videos? It's unbelievable. It's crazy. It's a complete lie. It's a complete lie, by the way. And I don't mind saying that. I don't think they're confused at all. The border is wide open. Everybody knows it. Homeland Secretary Mayorkas is lying to the public when he says it's fine, which is the reason why he doesn't want reporters with him to actually report on what's happening down there, because it's absolutely unheard of. We have over 15,500 children right now, unaccompanied minors in the U.S. Think about that. That doesn't even include all the people that have come through the border, the 100,000 in February and the hundreds of thousands more that are going to be coming in the next few months.
Right. And what about all the money the human trafficking organizations and the cartels are making from the exploiting of these kids?
And not only that, what about the terrorist organizations? You've investigated this, and this is, I have to ask this one last question, because I know I'm going over, but it's because you're so great and there's no one like you that understands the border. But there is a nexus, and that is what I talked about in the opening of my podcast, between the drug cartels and terrorist organizations. It's not alarmist. It's real. It exists. And nobody can tell me that it doesn't. I know the DEA has been looking into this for a long time. I know the CIA has been looking into this for a long time. I know our foreign intelligence partners have looked into this. And it is the reason why we're so concerned about a porous border, at least our intel agencies.
Right. So, Sarah, it's real simple. Terrorists are increasingly turning to crime and criminal networks for their funding because their funding streams have disintegrated because of sanctions and other good work that's been done around the world. But here's the problem. We had Project Cassandra as an example because it was well publicized. They were working very closely with the Los Zetas cartel. The main guy who was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia was involved with moving $200 million a month to the terrorist organizations. And he also was indicted for moving the proceeds of over 80,000 kilograms of cocaine for the cartels. So this is a very serious issue. But the other thing that I failed to say that's very important, the Chinese now are dominating the money laundering services business in America for the cartels. They are picking up the cash and they are moving money from one Chinese bank account to another on their smartphones, right? We can't do much about that. They're using encrypted apps and they're moving money and then they're buying consumer goods over in China. They're shipping the goods into South America or Mexico or wherever, and they're selling the goods and everybody's making money. And the poor law enforcement is in the dark because the laws are so antiquated. And these are countries around the world that are making a lot of money off the drug problem in America, right? And so
that's incredible. So the Chinese are laundering. They figured out how to launder the money the right way.
But Sarah, here's what they're doing. They have Chinese nationals, young kids running around the country, picking up millions of dollars. They give it to Chinese businessmen in the U.S. because there's an export limit of $50,000 a year out of Beijing. So they need cash here to buy houses, to buy property, to put their kids in school. So they pay cash. But here's also what they're doing. They're buying real estate all over the country and they're putting these state-of-the-art marijuana grow operations in these houses. And they're selling this very pure THC, very high purity pot around America. So they're buying houses with drug money in cash. Then they're selling the drugs all over the country. So again, they're destabilizing the country by pushing massive amounts of drugs and providing a service to the cartels. Last thing, if the cartels do not have their money and they do not have their chemicals, they can't produce the drugs. So what are we waiting for? Why are we not hitting these labs? Why are we not stopping the money? Why are we not dealing with this? It's got to be put on steroids. We have to have a state of emergency here for law enforcement to go after this problem because kids are dying at record levels.
That's why I brought you, Derek, on the show. I don't think there's anybody better to explain this. And I promise you that we'll get this out everywhere we can so that parents all over the country can be warned that this is an issue that is going to affect every single one of you, every single one of us. And none of our children are safe from this. None of them. You have to be right now the front line of defense for your child. And then people like Derek and others are going to be right there defending them as well, but out here in Washington, D.C. and probably shaking some common sense into our lawmakers. At least I hope so. Thank you so much, Derek, for being on the show with me.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you pushing the message. It's very important.
Once again, Derek Maltz, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't wait to have you back on. But we can't just keep it all border, right? Because there is so much happening in our world. And one of the biggest pieces of news that I'm interested in, of course, I've talked about this a million times, but is the UFOs. Basically, what are these unidentified aerial phenomena, or these unidentified flying objects that our government is now actually admitting to, saying, well, we don't understand this completely, but we know that we don't have the technology to conduct these type of flights. Remember, we talked about it before with Luis Elizondo, the Tic Tac issue and all of this. Now, even more information is coming out. We know we're expecting a report anytime now from the government that's going to be submitted to the Senate. I don't know if you all remember this, but during the COVID relief package, that was part of this side thing, they have a ton of pork in the COVID package. It's not all about COVID, but there was also a requirement. It gave basically the government 180 days to turn over all the information being requested by the Senate regarding the, now it's called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. So that's why I've had Luis Elizondo on the show. I had the former defense, he worked for the Defense Ministry of Great Britain, Nick Pope, on the show, and others to talk about this because I think it's very important. It would probably be one of the greatest, it would be the greatest discovery or revelation in mankind, in the history of mankind, because it would prove that we are not alone, that this universe is much more vast, that we are not the only intelligent beings in existence. I think that's probably like the second question to, is there a God, right? Is there a God? Are we alone? I think that those are two questions that all of mankind since the beginning of history has pondered on. So here is the director of national intelligence. This is John Ratcliffe. He is being asked by Maria Bartiromo on her show on Fox News about all these reports about UFOs. And, at first when she asked him the question, she kind of like giggles a little. I mean, it's uncomfortable for a lot of people because a lot of people were ostracized before for talking about this subject, right? So she giggles a little bit about it. And then here is what John Ratcliffe has to say.
Sure. We have lots of reports about what we call unidentified aerial phenomenon. And this actually is a program that's been in place for a few years in terms of a task force that has been there under the National Defense Authorization Act. But as you correctly point out, Maria, there's now a report that will be issued by the Pentagon, by the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. I actually wanted to get this information out and declassified before I left office, but we weren't able to get it down into an unclassified format that we could talk about quickly enough. But frankly, there are a lot more sightings than have been made public. Some of those have been declassified. When we talk about sightings, we're talking about objects that have been seen by Navy or Air Force pilots or have been picked up by satellite imagery that, frankly, engage in actions that are difficult to explain, that movements that are hard to replicate, that we don't have the technology for, or traveling at speeds that, exceed the sound barrier without a sonic boom. So, in short, things that we are observing that are difficult to explain.
I think that it is absolutely fascinating that we're at this point in our history and that we may be the first generation to actually have proof that there is something else beyond our world and possibly intelligent life somewhere far beyond our world in the universe. Hopefully more intelligent than what's happening here in Washington, D.C. in the swamp. I don't know, but if they're out there, please, and if you are picking up this by whatever type of satellite communications you have, and you happen to be aliens and you're listening to the Sara Carter show, and could you give some advice to the people over there on Capitol Hill? Because they have completely lost their minds and they are taking our country in a completely wrong direction. Completely wrong direction. Feel free to pick them up. Feel free to land over there and pick them up. Not all of them. There are some there that are really worth our time. But for those, maybe Nancy Pelosi, maybe you could do that. Maybe an Adam Schiff or two. You could pick them up and take them out. And we'd be happy. We'll see them later on, right? They can report back to us. But remember, they're the ones with the big wall around Capitol Hill. They're the ones that built the wall. They don't want a wall on the border. They built a wall around Capitol Hill. There's lots of questions that we don't have answered, folks. We need to keep pushing our lawmakers to answer them. I know we're busy. I know that our lives feel overwhelming sometimes, but it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to want to know the truth. It's okay to believe that there may be something else out there. Don't let anybody ever put you down. Don't let anybody ever make fun of a question that you have to ask or that you want answered. Because without asking these questions, we're kind of left in the dark, right? And we've seen what happens when censorship comes into play. We see what happens in our country when people are afraid to speak up. And we've seen what happened in history and what's happened in history when people don't speak up. So remember, here at the Sara Carter Show, we are never afraid to ask a question. We want to believe. And remember, we are taking the story back. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, and God bless. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Weber, the CEO of the Association for Mature American Citizens. It's also known as AMAC. Explain the differences. What makes AMAC superior to ARP beyond the fact that we don't agree with their leftist ideology?
What makes us so unique is that we truly do take our marching orders from our membership. Before we go out and about and advocate for any issue, we do consult with our AMAC members, and we do that through a variety of ways. But that really makes us very different, where AARP stood in support of Obamacare, even though their membership was largely against. AMAC will stand in support of our membership. In addition, Sara, we offer benefits. We offer benefits just like the AARP. Ours are better because we offer choices. For example, you can call AMAC for your Medicare, and we're not going to do a one-size-fits-all one plan. The AARP endorses United Healthcare, whereas AMAC has its own trusted in-house licensed insurance advisors that are working for AMAC, stand for our mission of faith, family, and freedom, and then go about offering real choices. We do a lot of things like that I think make us very different and make us, quite frankly, better.
Rebecca, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm honored to have you and AMAC as a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. For more information, folks, visit amac.us/Carter.